morning, good afternoon, or good evening from wherever you may be watching us from. My name is Mackrine Abuka, a counseling psychologist and a volunteer counselor at Parklands Baptist Church. Today, I'm going to talk about the importance of mental health. So what is mental health? Well, it's a part of our health that caters to our psychological and social well-being, and it affects how we think, how we feel, and how we act. So what are some of the factors that contribute to our mental health? We'd classify those into two. There'll be the biological factors, which would be genetic, or the chemical structure in the brain, or the environmental factors, and those would be anything in the environment that you interact with. And this could be family history of mental illness. It could be life experiences like the birth of a child, the death of a loved one, the loss of a job, divorce, and separation. So why is it important for us to pursue good mental health? When one has good mental health, one is able to make very effective decisions in the different areas of their lives. Another thing is that when you have good mental health, you're able to form and maintain healthy relationships, which is a very fundamental part of our existence. Another reason why good mental health is important is that you find that life does present challenges and changes as we go along. And with that, if you have good mental health, then you're able to cope and adapt as is necessary. Now, there are risk factors that would affect our good mental health. So I'm going to speak to some of the risk factors. There are many. So it's just for us to be aware of what could possibly affect our mental health. So one of the things is a stressful life event that one may interact with. And this could be something like the death of a pet, the loss of a job, a pandemic as we are experiencing now with the COVID-19. We could have natural disasters like landslides, mudslides, and landslides, and flooding and earthquakes. Those could affect people's mental health, that put them at risk of suffering adverse mental health. Diagnosis of a serious illness such as COVID is something that could put one at risk. Managing a chronic illness could put one at risk. Having adverse childhood experiences could put one at risk of having adverse mental health. Injury to the head is something to look out for. And a limited social network is also something else that is important for us to attend to around mental health. Now, with children, there are specific things that, if present, put them at risk of having poor mental health. Now, one of those things is having a caregiver who has a mental illness. That is something that puts a child at risk of suffering mental illness themselves. If a child has learning disabilities, then they would probably struggle in school, and that is something, if not attended to, could end up not very well for the child. Having limited social interactions, very, very key. Dysfunction in the family, a lot of fighting and disharmony, those are things that could really affect a child. And any form of abuse, be it verbal, physical, sexual, and even neglect. So we need to look out for those. But having said that, it's also good to know that there are protective factors that could help us to achieve good mental health, some of which include having a good sleeping routine, which enables one to get sufficient sleep and good quality sleep. It's important to know that you can have a lot of sleep, which is not good quality. So we look out for good quality and sufficient quantity sleep. Healthy family relationships, very, very important. If somebody feels that, they can share not just the happy moments, but even When they're in distress, they're able to share within the family setup. It then helps to promote good mental health. A strong social network, which one can lean on for support, very, very important. And this could be within the family setup still. It could be in the school setup, it could be in the workplace, and it could be in church, in all the social places that people get to interact. And I'd like to emphasize that it's also very, very important and helpful for the mental health for one to affiliate themselves to a religious, and a faith-based institution, because there one is able to connect with others and to increase their appreciation of meaning in life. What about for children? What are some of the protective factors that we as adults can provide for them? One, a stable home environment is very, very important. Having a proper routine that is also consistent both at school and at home. Children thrive on structure, so where there is structure, the children will thrive. They need to have good and appropriate educational support so that in the event that they have any learning challenges, then they get the appropriate interventions and they're able to learn in the way that best suits them. Having financial stability in the home front is also very important. Children actually get affected when financial resources are erratic. Security is also another thing that is important for children. If they sense that there's insecurity, then they wouldn't quite enjoy mental wellness as is expected. So having talked about the risk factors and the protective factors, I'd now like to get into what are some of the signs to look out for us to be able to tell if an individual is having adverse mental health. And there are many signs. I'll only speak to a few, which are most common. I'd start with irritability and anger and hostility that doesn't seem to be linked to anything in particular, or if there's a trigger, it may be in proportions that are considered to be disproportionate to the trigger. So that is something to look out for. You'd find that people with adverse mental health would exhibit extreme fear and anxiety, and they'd be very, very restless. They would be having challenges to cope with what is considered to be normal challenge, the normal challenges of life. So an individual who is faced with, say, the loss of a loved one may find themselves grieving, in more intense ways than what is considered to be within the range that allows them to function normally. You'd see that an individual may be having changes in their sleep pattern, so they may sleep too little or too much, and the quality of the sleep is such that they don't feel that they're sufficiently rested when they are done with sleeping. They would be having changes in their appetite, so they may be eating way more than they have been doing in their normal past, or way too little or not at all. Yeah, and in some instances, you'd find that people would engage in what we call self-medication. So they would engage in consumption of things like alcohol and other drugs, subscription drugs, perhaps cocaine and heroin and bangi and other such things. So when we observe these changes, then it would be helpful to find ways of intervening and helping an individual that is exhibiting these and having exhibited them consistently for a period. Yeah. Are there ways that we can engage to promote good mental health where one has not been adversely affected, or where one has been affected to get them to recovery? Yes, there are ways, and some of the ways include getting involved in exercise. So one would need to identify what exercise regime works for them, You could go to the gym, you could exercise out in the open, you could play a sport, you could do a combination of all those things. All these things help to, to generate the chemicals in the brain that help one to, regain good mental health where one is adversely affected, or to maintain good mental health where one is fine. Eating a balanced diet, very important. In as much as it's important for the physical, it's also important for the mental. So I would urge that one looks out for that. A strong social network is very, very important. We are living in times when the social network seems to be shrinking ever so fast. So you find that the way that we used to live in the villages, where your auntie was just a stone throw away, your grandfather was there, and there was a whole network of relatives close by who could support an individual. That isn't the case so much. And then we have social media in place where there's more happening in the social media space than is happening on a face-to-face basis. So that affects the social network. So it's important for one to be very deliberate in building the social network within the family setup and beyond the family setup, so that in the event that one needs support, then they have several points from where they can, reach out and get help. Another thing that is important for us to look at is what we call self-care. So you find that those who are in supportive roles as parents or as caregivers, maybe to our siblings or to our parents or to other people, may be so involved in their caregiving process to the extent that they fail to give themselves time to rejuvenate. So we encourage individuals to take time to do things that have a special meaning to them, even as they still attend to caring of others, because the best care that one can give is given when the person giving the care is at their best, and you're at your best when you're fully rejuvenated and motivated to do the work. It also helps to have an attitude of gratitude. So think of the things that you're thankful for, and even go ahead and write them down. I would say that get into the habit of everyday writing at least 2 things for which you're grateful. You could do that in a journal, you could do it in a piece of paper and put it in a jar. And after a period, you can sit down and just reflect on the things that have made you, happy in the past, and take an opportunity to thank God for that. Then the other thing is around sleeping. So I had mentioned it as a protective factor and as a risk factor, depending on which side of the divide you are. So sleeping is very, very important. So depending on what age you are, where you are across the developmental spectrum, you may need more or less sleep, depending on your personality as well. What is important is that you need to get enough sleep and good quality sleep. And how one is able to do this is to have a good sleep routine. So if you don't have a sleep routine, I think it's about time you checked into that. If you're a caregiver and you have not set a sleep routine for the people that you're taking care of, especially the young ones, it's time to look into that, because when you do adopt a good sleep routine, then you contribute very, very well to your mental health. So with those, I'd like to say, let's all take an interest in our individual mental health and the mental health of others. And in that way, we'll be helping to ensure that we have overall wellness as individuals. We are not just attending to one side of our being, we are attending to ourselves as an entire person. Thank you very much.